And yet another very wonderful evening out there to all of you, my dearest friends. We left off in Hosea chapter 5, talking about the captivity that is to come upon the nations of Israel, and especially that of the northern tribes, the 10 tribes, which leads us to Hosea 6. Come and let us return unto the Lord, for he hath torn, and he will heal us. He hath smitten, and he will bind us up. After 2 days, now this is quite the verse right here. Much speculation over this. After 2 days will he revive us. In the third day he will raise us up, and we shall live in his sight. A lot of speculation over this. My personal opinion on this particular verse is that a day is as 1,000 in the sight of the Lord, and I believe that this is talking about after their denial of Christ and 2,000 years, and then after the 2,000 years, then would come the third day, and that would be the millennial reign. Then shall we know, if we follow on to know the Lord, his going forth is prepared as the morning, and he shall come unto us as the rain, as the latter and former rain unto the earth. O Ephraim, what shall I do unto thee? O Judah, what shall I do unto thee? For your goodness is as a morning cloud, and as the early dew it goeth away. In other words, your goodness is of a short continuance, and gives way to every temptation, like as the cloud of the morning and the dew are dispersed at the first approach of the sun. Therefore have I hewn them by the prophets, I have slain them by the words of my mouth, and thy judgments are as the light that goeth forth, meaning the judgments pronounced upon them. For I desired mercy and not sacrifice, and the knowledge of God more than burnt offerings. I love statements like this by the Lord. King David was well aware that the Lord, he desired love from the inward parts. He desires your heart much more than 1,000 bulls to be sacrificed unto him. And the prophets also knew this as well. Any whom are close to God understand that earthly things, they're all his anyway. But what it tells us with that is how, whether you're rich or poor, whether you have 1,000,000 cattle or you have none, it's all the same in God's eyes. It's the great equalizer, you see. God, he's no respecter of persons, whether you're a king or the lowest bum on the street that everyone steps over. He wants your heart. He wants you to love him. He wants a personal relationship with you, because all those other things are not going to be in heaven. But they, like men, have transgressed the covenant. There have they dealt treacherously against me. Gilead is a city of them that work iniquity, and is polluted with blood. And as troops of robbers wait for a man, so the company of priests murder in the way by consent. You see, the priests, they didn't ever acknowledge all of these terrible things happening around them. For they commit lewdness. I have seen a horrible thing in the house of Israel. There is a whoredom of Ephraim. Israel is defiled. You see, the priest, they did not only encourage murderers and commit murders within the city, but go out in a body together upon the highway, and there commit murders and robberies, and divide the spoil among them, all which they did unanimously, and were well agreed, being brethren in iniquity as well as in office. Every single rank of society had just become completely corrupted, leaving only just a precious few that actually really loved and feared God. Also, O Judah, in the south, he hath set a harvest for thee when I returned the captivity of my people. A little bit of a divide on what this harvest means. Is this one of blessings? Is this one of chastisement? Well, I decided to go with Matthew Poole's comment on this. Thy God hath appointed a harvest for thee. Thou shalt not, as Israel, be utterly cut off. A seed of thee shall be sowed, and thou shalt reap the harvest with joy. Because more times than not, a harvest points to prosperity, a blessing, because that's whenever they would, of course, bring in their harvest, and they would rejoice. It would be a time of joy. But there's also this harvest mentioned in Revelation, where it's one of just the end of the world, as society would know it. But I do believe that this is much more pointing towards Judah being brought back into the land, unlike the northern tribes, which have been scattered ever since. Judah actually was brought back for hundreds of years. They got to rebuild with a second temple, and even the city of Jerusalem. They got to rebuild, bring back everything. And then at the time of Christ, after they rejected Christ, they lost everything. And it's just now starting to be built back up since 1948. But my friends, that is most certainly because of the second coming going to be approaching. The rapture probably just literally moments away in the relative time of everything else, just moments away. Hosea 7. When I would have healed Israel, then the iniquity of Ephraim was discovered, and the wickedness of Samaria, for they commit falsehood, and the thief cometh in, and the troop of robbers spoileth outside. And they consider not in their hearts that I remember all their wickedness, now their own doings, because they haven't repented. So the Lord remembers their wickedness. Now their own doings have beset them about. They are before my face. They make the king glad with their wickedness, and the princes with their lies. Can you imagine living in a society where the king is glad at wickedness? America, we can. Our president, he delights in wickedness. Albert Barnes commented, their king, being wicked, had pleasure in their wickedness, because he was wicked. And they, seeing him to be pleased by it, set themselves the more to do what was evil, and to amuse him with accounts of their sins. It's just a cycle. It gets worse and worse. He loves it. They love it even more because he loves it, and then they love it even more, and then it's just a build-up and a build-up, and it's just totally corrupt. They are all adulterers, as an oven heated by the baker, who ceaseth from raising after he hath kneaded the dough, until it be leavened. In the day of our king, the princes have made him sick with bottles of wine. He stretched out his hand with scorners, meaning that the king and his princes, they all joined in with these evil people. But what is this figure right here pointing towards? As an oven heated by the baker, who ceaseth from raising after he hath kneaded the dough until it be leavened. The fire of the oven is like lust. The oven is the heart. The baker ceaseth from kindling when the oven has reached a certain heat. He stops from kindling once that it reaches a certain heat. And then he leaves the fire to smolder till the fermentation of the dough is complete and a fresh heating is necessary. So after passion has once been gratified, it smolders for a time, but it is afterwards kindled to a greater heat than before. When some attractive object comes within its range, you see there, Paul speaks about this. He says, it's better to marry than burn. Burn with lust, burn with passion, because that'll cause you to just go out of your mind. For they have made ready their heart like an oven, whiles they lie in wait. Their baker sleepeth all the night. In the morning it burneth as a flaming fire. They are all hot as an oven, and have devoured their judges. All their kings are fallen. There is none among them that calleth unto me. They're just built and set, dead set on their passions, their lust, their sin. Horsley commented, as it conceals the lighted fire all night, while the baker sleeps, but in the morning burns as a flaming fire, so they brood mischief in their hearts, while conscience is lulled asleep, and their wicked designs wait only for a fair occasion to break forth. The slightest opportunity to do wickedness, they jump on it. Ephraim, he hath mixed himself among the people. Ephraim is a cake not turned. Strangers have devoured his strength, and he knoweth it not. Yea, gray hairs are here and there upon him, yet he knoweth not. Now, once again, just for any of you who may not know, Ephraim is referring to the northern kingdom. Now, what is meant by this Ephraim as a cake not turned is that on one side, a cake is being burnt because, like their Baal worship, they've turned completely to their sin. But on the other side, they've completely left cold and not even heeded any of God's words. So this is a double-edged sword to them. It's completely ruined, this cake. But also, what is meant by, yea, gray hairs are here and there upon him, yet he knoweth it not. Charles Ellicott, he believes that this is the signs of senility, how they've went senile. The signs of senility are upon him. Gray hairs are his passing bell, the death bell that they would pass whenever a funeral or death is approaching or something. Gray hairs are that warning sign. He is under sentence of death and knoweth it not. Verse 10, and the pride of Israel testifieth to his face, and they do not return to the Lord their God, nor seek him for all this. Ephraim also is like a silly dove without heart. They call to Egypt, they go to Assyria. And what is being meant is like a dove that doesn't suspect calamity that to come upon them. They're silly, meaning that they're just ignorant. They go about doing foolish things, not considering the serious issues. It's just like Jesus said, ye strain at a gnat, but swallow a camel. You have the order of things completely inverted. You should consider the weightier issues of life, but they don't. They're silly. When they shall go, I will spread my net upon them. I will bring them down as the fowls of the heaven. I will chastise them as their congregation hath heard. Woe unto them, for they have fled from me. Destruction unto them. Oh man, it's just reading this. I think to myself, there is nothing that you would want worse or less. There is nothing that you would flee from more than God's attitude like this being directed directly towards you and honed in on your people. Destruction unto them? Because they have transgressed against me, though I have redeemed them, yet they have spoken lies against me. And what it's believed that the Lord is referring to here is that of the golden calves that they still worshipped in the northern tribes because they didn't want to go down to Jerusalem. There was so much animosity between the tribes that they kept worshiping these golden calves. Set up a calf in Bethel and a calf in Dan, one to the south, one to the north. And they called these calves. Jeroboam actually says, this is the God that brought you out of Egypt. It was most certainly a lie to say such a thing. What an abominable, blasphemous thing. And that's how they began. And they've been doing that for hundreds of years up until this point. And they have not cried unto me with their heart when they howled upon their beds. Very important point right there. They have not cried unto me, though they howl upon their beds. We'll come to the point in that right here in a second. They assemble themselves for corn and wine, and they rebel against me. Though I have bound and strengthened their arms, yet do they imagine mischief against me. You see, they're paying lip service. And how many people in church do this falsely, just for an outward display? Like the Pharisee praying in public, they have their reward. Oh, how pious is that one? How great of a Christian. If I could only be like that one. They return, but not to the Most High. They are like a deceitful bow. Their princes shall fall by the sword for the rage of their tongue. This shall be their derision in the land of Egypt. And what is meant by this deceitful bow? He says they're like a deceitful bow, meaning that they're like a bow that fires an arrow and it hits everything but the mark. They go after everything except turning to God. Chapter 8. Set the trumpet to thy mouth, he shall come as an eagle against the house of the Lord, because they have transgressed my covenant and trespassed against my laws. The king of Assyria is intended, who for his rapidity, avarice, rapacity, and strength is fitly compared to this royal bird, the eagle. He is represented here as hovering over the house of God, as the eagle does over the prey which he has just espied, and on which he is immediately to pounce. Israel shall cry unto me, my God, we know thee. Israel hath cast off the thing that is good, the enemy shall pursue him. They have set up kings, but not by me, meaning not of the house of David. They have made princes, and I knew it not. Not meaning that the Lord wasn't aware of it. He's not recognizing them as princes. Of their silver and their gold have they made them idols, that they may be cut off. Thy calf, O Samaria, hath cast thee off. Mine anger is kindled against them. How long will it be before they attain to innocency? For from Israel was it also. The workman made it. Therefore it is not God, but the calf of Samaria shall be broken in pieces. Once again, referencing back to the golden calves of Dan and Bethel. The calf or ox, Clark commented, The calf or ox, which was the object of the idolatrous worship of the Israelites, among many others, but these always were worshipped. The others came and went. Of the idolatrous worship of the Israelites was a supreme deity in Egypt. They actually derived that idea of worshiping a calf from that of Egypt. Remember how they worshipped it whenever Moses was on the mount for 40 days? And he comes down, prays it. Well, they got that from Egypt. And it was there in Egypt that they learned this idolatry. The cow is a most sacred animal still among the Hindus. Yes, my friends, think it no strange thing that Hindus still consider such animals, such simple animals, so basic. They even, some of them consider their dung and their urine sacred. They believe that they can cure their illnesses by means of their leavings. For they have sown the wind, and they shall reap the whirlwind. It hath no stalk, the bud shall yield no meal. If so be it yield, the strangers shall swallow it up. Israel is swallowed up. Now shall they be among the Gentiles as a vessel wherein is no pleasure. Notice the imagery right here. For they have sown the wind, and they shall reap the whirlwind or tornado. Once again, Adam Clarke commented on this. The ventral seed shall be multiplied into a tempest. So they who sow the seed of unrighteousness shall reap a harvest of judgment. This is a fine, bold, and energetic metaphor. Verse 9, for they are gone up to Assyria, a wild ass alone by himself. Ephraim hath hired lovers. Yea, though they have hired among the nations, now will I gather them, and they shall sorrow a little for the burden of the king of princes. Now, what's being said right here about this, they're like a wild ass. Clarke also commented on this, how they're like that animal, the wild ass, jealous of its liberty and suffering no rival, will keep a whole flock of females to himself, suffer no other to approach them, and even bite off the genitals of the colts, the younger ones, lest in process of time they should become his rivals. The Israelites, with all this selfishness and love of liberty, took no step that did not necessarily lead to their thraldom and destruction. Every means of evil they took. And we see that in verse 11. Because Ephraim, the north, hath made many altars to sin. Many altars. Altars shall be unto him to sin. I have written to him the great things of my law, but they were counted as a strange thing. They sacrifice flesh for the sacrifices of mine offerings, and eat it, but the Lord accepteth them not. Now will he remember their iniquity and visit their sins, they shall return to Egypt. For Israel hath forgotten his Maker, and buildeth temples, and Judah, the southern, where Jerusalem is, hath multiplied fenced cities. But I will send a fire upon his cities, and it shall devour the palaces thereof. I thank you all for joining me once again, my dear friends. Lord willing, we're going to be picking up in Hosea chapter 9. God of peace be with you all. Amen.